Thank you, everyone. This is the October meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association, which is a little off schedule, as you may know, because we preempted for the debates last week. So a couple of quick announcements, or actually one just for now. Just wanted to bring to your attention, I think we're all a little bit planning study weary at this point, but not long before starting this meeting this afternoon, actually got an email from one of the senior planners at Planning and Zoning in the city, announcing the industrial waterfront land use planning study is now starting. And so, as you know, in East Norwalk, we have a lot of waterfront that goes along the river and the harbor, and then of course down to the Sound. And we're also impacted by potential changes in uses to waterfront that actually goes across the river into South Norwalk. So this is something we really want to pay attention to, but more so than paying attention to it, we really want to be involved in making sure that that we participate in understanding what's possible and what folks would want to see or not see, as the case may be. And so we are looking for volunteers, as we always do, who might have a particular interest in the waterfront or some expertise, or just want to be more involved to be able to participate more on an in-depth level with the study and become a part of the ENNA team to represent us and report back to us, and when possible to attend any of the public meetings related to this via Zoom. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to bring your attention to that we spoke about really briefly at last month's meeting is the issue that we have particularly in East Norwalk, but in different parts, depending on where you abut a highway, there's a significant amount of highway noise. So there's noise pollution and also air pollution as well related to the highway. And a group out of Greenwich has organized fairly robustly and started a 501c3 called stop95noise.org. And they represent, formally they represent residents from like the Byram line all the way up to Old Greenwich. And many of those properties abut the highway there. They have started a campaign that is lobbying the state for highway sound attenuation. And they have funded at least one noise study. And I took a brief look at this today, and it looks like it makes a pretty compelling case. As you guys are familiar, we've also gone to the state in the past 15 to 20 years looking to get at least sound barriers in. And so the studies the study that they've done backs up all of the scientific research that's been done relative to noise from highways. This group in particular is not just suggesting sound barriers, but they also want the state to take a look at investment in new highway materials so that when bridges and highways are being reconstructed and repaired, that they take a look at using materials that actually reduce the amount of sound from cars, but especially from trucks as well. And I haven't really gotten into this too deep, but I understand they are supporting technology that is widely used in Europe and apparently in all types of climates as well. In the past, we've been met with resistance from local and state public works and DOT officials by saying that the type of technology that would help to reduce noise, even on our local roads, for example, and our main thoroughfares like US 1, et cetera, that those technologies aren't conducive here because we have snow and ice. But apparently that has changed now. And if I understand the research that this group has put out, is that investing in these new material technologies isn't really all that much more expensive than what they would be using nowadays. That does nothing to attenuate the noise. So we are looking again for people who are interested in this. I presume that Many of us who live closest to the highway and are most impacted will take a more robust interest in this group. They represent themselves out of Greenwich, but they are looking for, and they're collaborating with neighborhoods that go all the way along the stretch of I-95, I think as far as New Haven, maybe further than that. So they'll be bringing on formal neighborhood associations as well. One of the things that's interesting about this is that even before they really organized as the group that they are today, and I think they have 1,000 people who have signed up for their emails and have joined the efforts, which is incredible. But as they were starting this project, Greenwich or the DOT was about to launch a major reconstruction and repaving project in Greenwich through several exits in Greenwich. That's very similar to what they're about to start in East Norwalk, from exit 16 all the way up to at least exit 18. DOT told us that when they presented the project in Norwalk to the public, that basically that they weren't going to do anything about sound attenuation, and that the project needed to be done, and it was going to move ahead as planned and as funded, and that there wouldn't be any sound barriers, etc. Their only kind of point to us was that, you know, they would take a look at making sure that the decibel levels are measured and that any excessive decibel noise would be enforced. But obviously, any of you have been involved with any kind of noise and enforcement, you know that that's just not practicable. These things happen in the middle of the night. Not easy to get a hold of someone who can actually respond to a complaint. Sometimes by the time the complaint is made and there's a supervisor on site who can measure the noise and see what the impact is, and that part of the drilling or digging or something may have already stopped. The concern here for us also is that in Norwalk, this project is in different segments of the highway is going to last for weeks at a time, if not months. And a lot of this work, as you might suspect, because of the heavy highway and commuter traffic during the day, is planned to be overnight. And that's going to be extremely disruptive in terms of sleep, and which raises its own health concerns. So just wanted to give you a little bit more information on that, because the group is moving pretty fast now. The stop95noise.org. You may have seen that they had a press conference that News 12 covered. They're also doing starting to do some media blitz and getting communication that's going directly to the governor and to the DOT. So at this time, we want to make sure that people are aware of it. And if you have an interest in this, or you can help ENNA participate in this project, then we certainly want people to step up and give us a hand there. And you can email us. And you can also, if you want more information right now, you can visit their site, and it's simply stop95noise.org. And you can see that their website is up and running. They have a lot of information there, and I understand they're going to be adding information all the time, so they'll be keeping it updated. So we'll move on to the topic that we do hope that people will participate in tonight. We want to hear from as many people as possible, and also make this a brainstorming session. And especially since we'll be getting some more information out to you over the next couple of weeks. This topic is the East Avenue Village Transit Zone. As you know, this is the actual implementation of the East Norwalk Transit-Oriented Development District that has already been approved in its entirety from the city. And the next step is for the city to actually do a zoning text amendment, which is the legal avenue for them to create an opportunity in a designated zone. In this case, it's basically the East Avenue corridor from I-95 to Mill Pond, and then encroaching into some of the abutting side streets. And what this text amendment does, just to give you a brief history again, is to actually allow the city to create the zone and to put into the regulations under which zoning guidelines the zone will have approved land uses. The other part of the document that's being considered now and needs to be approved is what's called the design guidelines. And that really goes more to the aesthetics and setbacks and trees and, green space and, driveways, etc., that go with each new proposed development. The text amendment itself outlines what would be allowed in the zone and what would be allowed in the zone now that would be taken out, and what would be put into the zone as an allowed use, either as of right or with a site plan review, which is a pretty basic review. It just comes into zoning and they take a look at the site plan. If everything complies with the regulations, then I think unless there's something particularly special about it having to go to zoning, it wouldn't even require a public hearing. And then the third component of that is what they're suggesting would be allowed in that corridor by special permit. And that's where you see that we've talked a lot over the past months and as much as a year of the idea that this particular zone would allow a greater height of buildings in a mixed-use development and greater density of the residential units. In other words, by special permit, a particular developer could come in and put in an application that if he met certain criteria by providing specific public amenities, and we'll talk about those in a minute, that they would be allowed to go above the 2.5 story, which would be the regular height for the corridor, and apply to go as high as 3.5 stories. And they would be allowed to put in residential units that are basically double the amount of what could be built on that particular parcel otherwise. I don't know if there's any questions on that so far, Megan and Kat, or if anybody has their hands up. It's a bit to digest there, so I'll stop and explain any of that if anybody wants.
This is Sarah. Oh, I didn't raise my hand. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Sarah. You can go for it.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. My question is just so that I understand well enough about the height and the density, and probably the question is for everybody to kind of make sure we've all got our heads around it. If they're able to put in double the density, well, let's say we leave the height piece out of it, double the density, that means, if they were going to be able to, before putting in double, they were going to be able to put in, I don't know, 1,000 residents, that means they would then be able to put in 2,000 residents. Is that what you mean with double, or double the amount of apartments?
Exactly. And that quantity, that is probably a bit of an exaggeration there, because it would still be a maximum depending on the actual, footprint of the parcel, the lot area size. So the way that it works is that the overall amount of residential density is dictated by the size of the parcel. That's where kind of the threshold starts. So if you had a parcel that would normally allow 1 unit for every 1,600 square feet of the lot area of that parcel, then with the developer actually committing to provide certain bonus amenities, which in theory are supposed to benefit the community, they can put together a mix of these bonus points that would allow them to essentially double the density. So instead of 1 unit for every 1,600 square feet, they essentially could do 1 unit for every 800 square feet of a parcel.
Okay, so that helps me a lot. Thank you. I think in some way I need in my mind, a way to kind of get my head around it without getting kind of like too deep in the details of square feet. And it basically does mean what I was thinking, where we might think that at 2.5 stories and however much density we would have these, and I have obviously, I have looked into these amenities, which I think are absolutely ridiculous. They're more like benefits to the developer than they are to us. Then if they clear this special permit, which inevitably everybody clears it, then suddenly they can literally have twice the density being, just to be clear, quantity of humans and quantity of cars, right? And quantity of noise and quantity of services. So literally they can have double the quantity of humans on East Avenue in that area just by saying we're going to do a pocket park and stick a solar panel on top of our development or whatever it is. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
And if they go, and going from 2.5 to 3.5 really gives them the opportunity to beef up the quantity of humans, right?
Well,
Because
right,
it adds that many
because then
more.
you have the benefit of vertical instead of having to,
Right.
I'll talk about it in a second if people want, but because the parcels are relatively small on East Avenue,
Yeah.
there's the understanding, and Steve Kleppen is open about this, and I'm not sure if the commissioners who are ultimately going to vote on this really get it, but there's the understanding from a developer's point of view that to be able to provide parking and any amenities and to be able to support what would be ground floor activated uses like retail or restaurants or services, that these parcels really aren't conducive to that. And so the idea is that you're going to have developers who over a period of time, and as you've heard me say before, developers are really patient people.
Yeah.
They will, what they'll do is once it's imminent that these changes are going to go through, and they may have actually already started now, they will begin to assemble parcels.
Right.
And that could be parcels that are directly on East Avenue. And when you look at the EVTZ map of what's being designated in the zone, and just so that people can kind of visualize that the parcels, the assembly doesn't necessarily mean just in a straight line on East Avenue. Where the zone allows to go into the abutting streets, for example, Fitch, I think Proward is in there, Van Zant, Rowan is definitely in there, Van Zant, etc. That the parcels then can be combined not just on East Avenue, but going in for 1 block or more into the side streets.
So this special permit, if we allow them to be able to do what they want to do, we could be getting ourselves into way worse than it looks on the surface.
Well, I would say that because every parcel would not be denied the right to have a developer put in an application for the maximum use, that we have advised residents that our consideration should be the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Because even though the city staff and commissioners contend that it's unlikely to happen, that over a period of time we would have a maximum build out, the fact remains that it could happen. And it could actually happen with a handful of relatively deep pocketed developers who take large, take parcels and assemble them into large, large parcels, and still be within this 3.5 story. They could still fall within what that guideline is.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So right now where we stand is that the Planning and Zoning Director, Steve Kleppen, and presumably the administration, and certainly the zoning commissioners are all appointed by the administration, are all are all proponents and very of this plan and very eager to move this plan forward so that the text amendment that creates this zone and all the guidelines under which land uses would be approved are looking to do that and get that done by the end of this year. And so for anyone who has been involved so far with this, with ENNA, you know that along this time that we've been evaluating this thing, we have come up with a laundry list of concerns that we have, representing the concerns that the residents bring us and that our board obviously has discussed. And the list is now so lengthy that we just don't see where we for this community, we just can't sit back at this point and just let this thing go to another review. A public hearing that in all likelihood would be held via Zoom And we can talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that tonight if you'd like. And a public hearing that so far Steve Kleppen would like to have with the zoning commission the second week in December. And so while we're, one of the first to say that, if the city waits to the best time to have public meetings and things, these things simply wouldn't happen. There's always going to be conflicts, but there are 2 times of the year that just drive us insane when people are trying to push through an agenda and block the public. And that's the summer time frame, especially August, and then the holiday time frame from Thanksgiving right on through to New Year's. So the review of this continues, I think it's the day after Election Day, the beginning of November. And then there's not another review or any other opportunity until the zoning commission, who ultimately votes on this, until they actually hold a public hearing on December 12th. And if they were going to hold that hearing then and continue discussions and getting information and getting feedback on how to massage this thing and make it work for everyone, if they were going to do that into, January or next year, it might not be so bad. But the intent of staff and again, presumably the administration, has been pushing for the approval of the plan before the end of the year, meaning there would be a public hearing on December 12th. And I don't think they have their second meeting in December because of the holidays. So there actually is possibly a vote that same night as the public hearing to advance this.
Yes, hi. I just want to touch on the height for a second, and it's something we did not talk about yet. Currently allowed in this zone is 2.5 stories. The proposals to go to 3.5, but by special permit, you could go an additional 10 feet, which brings a building height up to 45 feet, which is in effect as tall as a 4-story building. And that's something to really take notice of, when you discuss these amenities to get the special permit. A 4-story building is quite tall. That's as tall as the building, the industrial building on Van Zandt Street. And, by the train station, the big complex there is about 4 stories as well.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Because one of the other things I think that we should do, I think probably there's a percentage of people like myself who really can't visualize things. Like I just can't picture in my mind the relationship of height to like the average person on the sidewalk. And I appreciate actually the same person there, Charles, who's able to do some of our graphics to scale that illustrate that. But one of the things that might be interesting for people to see is if we have an opportunity, a technique that a lot of people use to illustrate height is to actually float balloons along a string of the road, much like, the types of balloons and things like that a car dealer might do. And so that people would get an idea of how high these buildings would be. You still wouldn't get an idea of how tall they could be in terms of blocking out sun, either, sunrise on one side or sunset on the other. The impact on what we hope will be some sort of trees on East Avenue and canopy on the side streets. So that's a really good point. And when people say from staff advise the zoning commission that we're only going from 35 feet to 45 feet, that 10 feet is actually massive when you're talking about a road like East Avenue. That is coupled with something that made its way into this plan, where staff is suggesting that unlike other village districts, the East Avenue Transit District would have a minimum height of 2.5 stories. So now you have the potential to have 3.5 stories along who knows how much of the corridor, but you're going to lose the opportunity to have the differentiation and diversity of building, height and scale and visual, kind of the visual aspect of having different heights of buildings. So any building now that's on East Norwalk, on East Avenue, or that that's 1 to 1.5 stories, wouldn't be allowed in the future. And so every building that that goes in, or any change that's made to an existing use that stays as a use would have to conform then to the minimum 2.5 stories. So that's something to think about. But if you think about development that's mixed use, that combines residential with at least retail and or restaurants and or offices, the idea is that financially, you generally have to take advantage of every aspect of the zoning in terms of how big the building can be on the parcel, and to take advantage of, reducing as much as you can in terms of setbacks on all sides and access, and we already know possibly parking as well.
Yeah, we have a raised hand from Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Judy, you can unmute if you'd like.
All right. I've just been sitting here trying to type my issues into chat. One of my big issues, Diane, is that the amenities that are bonus height do not benefit the community if they're contained within the structure of the building, like rooftop gardens. It does nothing to enhance the pleasure of a resident, walking up and down. It's not like a leafy corridor. It's more like somewhere up in the air.
Right.
They're getting the
Yes.
benefit of, the radiant heat or something.
Yeah.
Same thing with solar. And, there are many other incentives available. They don't need height incentives, to the developer.
Thank you, Judy. I don't disagree with you. And as you're talking, actually, I'm just looking to pull out a chart that we're going to be including in some of our ENNA feedback
All right.
to the zoning commission. And when you bring up those amenities that deal with that are in the category that the city has dubbed sustainable amenities,
Right.
there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. There are 10 of those that all have to do with environmental sustainability. But of all of those, only one would be seen as a possible direct benefit to the community. And it's the one called a community garden. And it's probably the one in the options that a developer could choose from that would be the least likely to be included as a part of the plan or as a part of the footprint of a particular development. And one of the questions with that would be, could they provide an amenity to the community of East Norwalk by purchasing and then donating a parcel of land elsewhere outside of the East Avenue area for the development of a community garden that they ultimately pay for? But that would be one aspect, but I really don't see that happening. All of the other benefits either directly benefit the developer or the developer and their residential and their commercial tenants. And many of the amenities and sustainable amenities actually are used as a marketing tool to entice tenants to come in, either commercial or residential, because they see it either because it fits with their mindset on the environment, or they see it as an opportunity to reduce their costs, either as operating in their own apartment or in their own retail or restaurant space. The reason why we're concerned, especially with these sustainable amenities, is because somewhere along the line, in working through details with the ordinance committee and the planning committee of the Common Council, the staff decided to heavily weigh sustainable amenities versus all of the others. And so what they did was they said a developer can attain the maximum height and density as long as they provide the bulk of their amenity points within the sustainable categories. So if they need to attain, I think it's 20 points in order to get the maximum benefit for the developer, then I think that I think it's, 20 or, I don't know if it's 12 or 14 of those points have to come from the sustainable category. Now, by doing that, what they're doing is they're saying that a developer could essentially put in a whole host of sustainable amenities, just as Judy suggested, that basically have no direct benefit to the East Norwalk community. Yes, we realize that as a whole, as a universe, as planet Earth, that some of these do, ultimately, have a long-term impact in terms of our environment. And we certainly support that. What we don't support is trading off for the benefit of the developer, the possibility of height and density for things that actually, don't benefit us. One of the charts that we're preparing when we provide further feedback is a calculation of just how few amenities it would take to achieve those points. And you actually will look at it and just say it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, they can throw in a couple of, a water feature, a pollinator, pathway, little garden, some free Wi-Fi, and then throw in amenities that benefit themselves and their tenants from the sustainable group, and then be able to build to that level. I'm not sure if people understood or understand that at the same time that new uses are being approved under certain conditions within this zone, some existing uses are being eliminated. And the most important ones, which are 1 and 2 family housing. So any of the 1 and 2 family housing that's on East Avenue now, and some of the ones that are on the side streets, going in a block or two, they would not be allowed to exist or expand under the new zone. I mean, they can exist while they're there, kind of in perpetuity. But if somebody had a residential structure, say a house with, an office on the ground floor or a use, and they wanted to increase the size of that particular residential unit or house, then they wouldn't be able to do it under this plan. And someone who came in, and let's say that the house burned down, even under those conditions, they would have to go through, I believe, what is a pretty strenuous process of getting a variance to be able to replace that residential 1 and 2 family housing with the same thing. It's basically being blocked from the zone. So essentially, if you think of I-95 from the highway to Mill Pond, and then looping around a little bit there, and certainly to the bank, you're talking about the structures, some of the structures that exist now and are allowed now wouldn't be there.
We've got a couple more raised hands, Diane. I think Scott Goodwin is next.
Hey, gang. So my question goes back to Charles, what you were referencing earlier about the differential height. One thing I'm not clear on is I know they proposed even taller buildings for industrial zones, where it's like some large sort of showroom on the ground level with apartments above that. How does that play into this? Or does it?
Thanks, and thanks to Charles for illustrating that for us too. So the industrial 1 zone in East Norwalk basically runs along the railroad tracks and along up into Route 136. And so under that study, there's increased height of the possibility of buildings there because the consultant, through their studies and their understanding of how the markets work, one of the factors that's creating this is the fact that the ground floor has to be extremely high to be able to allow for different types of boutique and different types of manufacturing. And so the idea is that you would have that height on that ground floor, and I forget what it is. I want to say it's over 15 feet, it may be 20 feet. I have to take a look at that.
I think it's over 20. I don't remember exactly, but it's a good.
It's pretty high. I mean, it's like, high enough for, warehousing and. Mhm. And then what that does is that it impacts the amount of stories you have above it, then starts at that, let's say that 20-foot height, and it goes even higher than that. Charles may know the maximum height. I wanted to say it goes as high as 60 feet or 80 feet in some conditions, or is that right?
I don't remember the exact number, but it's pretty high, actually. And I think the industrial zone study has just come out again in a more final version, I believe, so it might have changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's definitely a concern. And of course, another factor in this is that they still have to take a look at, industrial zone, the restricted industrial zone, which is Norton. And for some reason, they're just kind of pushing that aside. But at some point, that's going to impact everything in East Norwalk as well. Yeah, so we'll get some more information on that. And then if you look at the EVTZ map and the zoning map that's actually identified for all of these plans is available online. And I think we pretty much always have it up on our website as well. So folks can take a look at those parcels. Another thing that there's a whole, like I said, there's a whole host of things that really need to be very closely examined in both the text amendment and the design guidelines. One of the things before we jump back into those bonus points is that for some reason, staff insists on putting in that retail space of less than 25,000 square feet of gross floor area would be allowed under regular site plan reviews. So again, I'm not visual. I don't really understand when somebody tells me 200 square feet. I don't get that. So I have to go and look for examples of it. And I had no idea what 25,000 square feet of gross floor area retail could mean, but it sounded like a lot. And so when Steve Kleppen was presenting this to the zoning commission, one of the commissioners asked, which was good, because he should always do this anyway, to provide some examples in context so that they would know what are some of the buildings and uses in Norwalk now that we could relate this to understand what that might be. And the example, he didn't really have any, and he's going to get them some, and we'll certainly ask for them as well. But the example he gave them was someone wondering about Rite Aid on East Avenue. And he thought that was about what it would be in terms of retail. But when I went to the land records for that parcel from the tax assessor's office, the floor area for Rite Aid is listed at 10,000 square feet. So if that's accurate, and yet what Steve is looking to do is to have basically, I want to say as of right, even though they still have to go through a process, but basically what he wants to do is to be able to allow in this corridor up to 25,000 square feet allowable of gross floor area for retail. And I think that's something I thought it had come out when I watched the last review with zoning last week or the week before. It was still in there, and we'll see what examples he comes back with, but hopefully I can find some in Norwalk that I can use to illustrate some buildings that would be some retail operations that would be recognizable to people as an example of what 25,000 square feet would be. I also noticed in the details that under site plan review, there isn't a maximum limit that's addressed for restaurants and taverns. And so that would be a concern as well, because I don't think that we're looking for some massive, chain type restaurant that's, I can't think of what one of the really big ones would be. But if they're allowed to virtually any size of a floor area on a suitable parcel, I think that would be something that we would be concerned about as well. And I also think that we need to carefully look at what's allowed as of right versus what would require a special permit. For example, last year or the year before, we really couldn't figure out why zoning staff was pushing hard to make a zone change to allow brew pubs and distilleries as an approved use in neighborhood business, which is what that zone is now. And it's in there, again, with no maximum size as well in this. So we're not sure if there are people who are lined up looking to bring those types of enterprises into East Norwalk. I would say no one's objecting to new retail and dining experiences and services and, places that are kind of combination dining and entertainment like a brew pub may be. I think the issue could be location and scale again. And if this plan doesn't limit it on the front end, I think we're going to have problems on the back end. And I'll say one more thing about that since we were talking about special permits to begin with. There's really nothing in this text amendment that allows for the city to make the conditions that the zoning commission considers when they are looking to approve or deny a special permit. There's nothing that really adds to making that a more stringent review to make sure that there's no adverse impact on the community. And so, sorry to repeat myself over and over again, but I can count on one hand in a gazillion years here the number of times a special permit has been denied in the city. And so once it gets to that point, when it gets before the zoning, commission, and chances are, it doesn't matter what the objections are from the community, the zoning commission is going to approve it. And if they don't approve it on the first go around, they may deny it without prejudice. They will have already highlighted what their concerns were, and they give the applicant an opportunity to come back and say, you gave us 4 things you were worried about, and the community was worried about, and we've addressed all 4 of those things. So now any legal case, the litmus test would be, did they act in, reasonable good faith to meet a preset criteria that the zoning commissioners gave them, and therefore it would have to be approved. Because one of the things that would open up, definitely some legal issues is that if the zoning commission said, we're really concerned with these 5 things with the way you want to develop this parcel, and the developer comes back and they've addressed all 5 of those things in the manner that would appease the commission really isn't in a position to say, oh, but now here's another 3 things, or here's another 4 things. Because it would be creating a hardship, and it would be also putting an undue burden that probably isn't imposed on other developers. So anyway, the long and short of that is that the fact that staff and the city officials tell us, don't worry about the size and scope of these buildings and what the potential uses are and what the footprints are going to be when they assemble parcels, because they have to be a special permit and they have to comply with meeting these bonus amenities. When they say don't worry about it, we're telling you to worry about it, because it's going to either fly through, and even if they meet these bonus points, to everyone else's point, the bonus points, even the ones that aren't related to sustainability, the bulk of them really benefit the developer themselves and their tenants. Even the ones that are part of public realm, the public domain. For example, an outdoor seating area and plaza. That's of high benefit to retailers and restaurants and even the residential tenants to have that available to them, especially in the absence of like open green space, etc.
Got another raised hand, Diane.
Okay.
Joan, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, this is JJ, not Joan. No.
Hi, JJ.
I think there's a comment in the chat from Mary Beth that also kind of echoes what's on my mind. And it's sort of in the category of what can we really do? And, why is this happening? And why does zoning want to steamroll and all this stuff? And I don't need an answer specifically to that questions, because, I'm a doer. When I'm going to put in some effort, I really want it to actually, make an impact. So, time trying to answer that. I'll just resolve it myself, saying that, we are existing taxpayers. We're already the existing revenue, and we have nothing to do with future revenue except, in other words, the expansion of a tax base is only going to come from developers unless we're allowed to, get bigger on our properties, which, that's not going to happen. So my guess is that, they have a different ear for developers versus existing, property owners. And so that's just where that's at. So I'm willing to write letters, and et cetera. I'm willing to call people, whatever you guys suggest, Diane. I'm willing to do all of that, but we're a small group, and there are tens of thousands of people in East Norwalk, and there are 30 something on this call, and you're not going to, we're probably not going to get tens of thousands involved by the time the first shovel hits the pavement. And so I'm just wondering, really, we're intelligent people. Sometimes we need a different kind of backdrop explanation for, like, how our effort is going to make an impact. So I'm really kind of wondering, from the expertise of the people that have been, nose to the grindstone on this since the beginning, what really is the soft spot here in terms of the path forward for, like, residents having a voice? Because it seems like we're in a very, sweet way that I appreciate, but we're sort of running up some of the same answers at every meeting. And if we're sensing that it's not going to, we're just going to be steamrolled, then what is our recourse, with the state or in court or something? Like, if this is something we really want to do. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And, I'll just preface that by saying, we'll open this up to other folks, because we'd be open to suggestions for what people think would help to engage the public. A couple of points on that is that, part of what we see the responsibility and kind of the mission of ENNA as an organization is to make sure that people are aware of issues, and so that they can decide on their own on whether they agree or disagree, and to what extent they might want to take action, and to what extent that action might mean. Because in the end, we know that there's, and I'll say it's a handful, because it is a handful. There are some people that support this plan basically as written. And then there's a bunch more that support it if only we could, move behind this idea of the height and density and some of the scary sizes for the uses. But the vast majority really, want this thing to either go away in its entirety, or to be rewritten in a way that actually meets what we thought that this vision could actually be, which would basically be to kind of bring some more life back into the corridor, but also some beautification of the area, coupled with the improvements that the city and state are already going to be doing. So there's only about, I think there's 8,000 people in East Norwalk proper right now, and that, includes every age group. But I believe there's 3,800 households. And I know in the last major, one of the last major events that we had here that focused on the Norden application, the warehouse application, that petition had, well over 1,000 signatures. I forget how many we got up to there, but in the end, I think what we need to do is look at everything in a toolkit to be able to allow people to engage on the level that they're most comfortable with, either from their skill level or their time commitment, or financial commitments. And I would say, for, speaking for the board, we're certainly open to suggestions on how that can happen so that this is impactful. And I think we also have to be really kind of clear in the end exactly what we're asking for. There is the sentiment that says some iteration of this plan, of this text amendment, is going to go through. And that's because the TOD, despite the good efforts of a lot of people, the TOD plan itself was approved. And so some iteration of all the things in this text amendment and those guidelines is going to happen at some point. And what we really need to do is make sure that we're mitigating as much of the stuff that we think is going to have a negative impact on East Norwalk. And we're really pushing for the things that we think are going to bring an improvement of quality of life or some of the amenities that we may not otherwise have access to here. And which also brings up the question of the opportunity to brainstorm again for when the city comes back at us to say, well, if you don't think these amenities are meaningful, then come back to us with a list of what it is that you would want. And that's hard to really define because you're talking about individual parcels and developers. So if it was something, big scale, like we wanted to have a neighborhood pocket park with a full-blown playground, what does that mean? Does that mean the first developer who comes in and wants to do a large parcel is the one who, has to, commit to doing that? Or is it something that ultimately the city has to enforce by saying after so much development, they have to kick into a fund that actually allows the development of something like that? I mean, it's really kind of tricky to come up with that list when you're talking about individual parcels. And we don't have a development application. So this is very different than when you already have an application before you. You already know the parcel, and then you can get together with the developer and city staff and say, it would be great if we could have this here, or if you didn't put this particular component there. But we have nothing to go on. But we do encourage people to continue to, because we don't think this is going to go away entirely, and you just raised the point of what are the other avenues. Probably the only avenue is the legal avenue, and that would cost a lot of money. We would have to raise a lot of money to be able to afford to do that. And any legal challenge of this ultimately kicks off a time clock that doesn't favor us. So it'd be hard to do, not impossible to do. And sometimes just lawyering up and, experting up is enough for the city to take notice and hit the pause button and go back and take a look at these things. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Okay, I was just waiting to be unmuted. It seems like we've been talking around, can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We're talking around these plans in circles for the last 2 years, and I've attended almost all of these hearings. And the residents in the neighborhood are adamantly opposed to the way these plans are going forward. But if you watch the members of the zoning commission, and in particular Steve Kleppen, he says, well, the plans are going forward. I don't care what the residents think. This is what we're doing. And it's appeared in the newspapers and everything else. So somebody is getting a big benefit to this that the residents are not. If we're creating an opposition kit, for whom are we doing this and what do we hope to get? Because so far, we haven't managed to change anything.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to change something, but I'm feeling a little frustrated that we're not being
Yeah, it is frustrating because we feel, one of the pushbacks that even we get is that people really kind of have gotten burned out now, and we have the why bother. They attended the forums, they did the charrettes, they filled out the surveys. They came to ENNA meetings where we had, city staff and consultants come in and explain things. They drew circles on maps. They, compiled lists of things that they wanted and didn't want. I mean, all of the exercises. And when you look at that, and I think it may have been Scott Goodwin, who I think is still on, who said, if you were in those meetings, one of the first things that people really vocalized was, we don't want anything taller than 2.5 stories when we were talking about East Avenue and that corridor. And yet everything comes back then with these exceptions for, but this is how we're going to be able to do this for the developers. So that amount of frustration, Mary Beth, has really led a lot of people to say, why bother? I mean, people's time is really valuable, and their efforts, and they're consumed with other things, and they really feel that they're not being listened to. But part of the being listened to is being vocal and visible in a way that highlights the number of people. There was something, and I'm not going to take it as fact, that I saw something on social media the other day where the city shouldn't really be, kind of judging the merits of this plan, where apparently a neighbor suggested that a sitting zoning commissioner who's running for office had told this resident that the majority of East Norwalkers are in favor of the plan. And because we routinely request all of the correspondence to the city, which we're entitled to under Freedom of Information, we get copies of every letter and every email that goes into city staff and the mayor and zoning commission. And so that's hardly the case. By far, the majority of people who know about this, and we're talking about, probably, over 1,000, would be able to say, yes, I know that this plan is there. The majority of those are completely opposed to it. And then you have, like, the next group would be, I'm opposed to it, but I could maybe buy into this with some changes. And so the idea here is that it's got to move beyond Steve Kleppen and the zoning and planning commissions. It has to move beyond into the administration that really has, jurisdiction over all of that. You can't have a city administration that says we're hands off of zoning, when in fact the zoning director indirectly reports into the mayor through his staff, and where each of the zoning and planning commissioners who are sitting today and considering and voting on these are all hand appointments of this mayor and the past and the present common council. So we do have to elevate these outside of just public hearings and sending, communications into Steve Kleppen. And that's part of what the, this opposition, I hate using that word, but it's, it's really what it is at this point, of gathering the ideas to put together this opposition toolkit so that we give enough tools to the broad residents in East Norwalk and beyond, because there's a lot of people outside of East Norwalk that are horrified by this proposal, that people can pick and choose what they either have the time to do or the skills to do or the interest in doing. And so you'll see up here on the screen that we're getting ready to pull this all together and post it, but we're putting together a petition that actually lists all of the criteria that residents really want to be considered before any of this advances to another hearing. And one of the things that we're asking for, by the way, is that the city put a stop to the next review of this thing. Like, just literally hit the pause button until these concerns have been addressed. It is impactful for elected and appointed officials to get letters from people. Once they get a couple of letters in, then every other one seems like it's just, so much more than just a couple of people writing. There's a couple of different schools of thought on how effective form letters are. But as far as we're concerned, any email and any letter that makes it into the hands of elected and appointed officials that have jurisdiction over this is something good. And for the most part, even with our form letters and emails, residents have been adding in their own personal touch and what a change may mean to them, either negatively or positively. And another good tool is letters to the editor and in social media, because it does also help to spread the word that to people that may not be aware. We're considering actually doing another postcard mailer within East Norwalk, just to bring people up to date in case they're not aware, which is hard to believe. But and then in addition to the petition, also having surveys that are pretty distinct and saying, are you aware of this plan? Basically, are you for or against it, or might you be for this if it's modified? Just as kind of a barometer. And so when we get hundreds and hundreds of responses back to something like a survey, those also get compiled and shared with City Hall as well. And then finally, another idea that came up was a possible, literally a demonstration at City Hall that would be combined with a press conference. And so it'd be a peaceful, just visible show of people with signs that would illustrate either a concern over this project or outright, opposition to this proposed plan. And, hopefully something within the next couple of weeks, because we know zoning is scheduled for their next review of this with Steve Kleppen on November 3rd, I think it is. the day after Election Day. So I may not have answered anything that you just raised, but
it just seems to me we have very little time to take action, and we know that we don't have the support of the city, and we do not have the support of the zoning commission. So my view is that we have to make ourselves as visible and as loud and as obnoxious as we can make ourselves. And if it requires every day marching to City Hall and grabbing more and more people, we should do that, because we can talk to Steve Klepp until we're all nuts and he's still not going to listen to us, because somebody is getting a huge benefit to this plan, but it is not the residents who live here. And we need to draw in the entire city in any way we can, whether it's a letter every single day to the newspaper, whether it's posted signs, whether it's going to every single polling place to say, do you know what's happening in East Norwalk? It just seems we have to be a lot more visible to get a crowd of people to say, this is unacceptable.
I don't disagree with you. And, and how we, engage people, and, when and where is always what the challenge is. People will commit to do stuff that's, comfortable to their own level. And it's really hard to get people to turn out. And, we're always asking for people to tell us, what is it that you're willing to do? Even something as simple as, we do have people that will volunteer like on their own street to go around and walk around with like a paper petition for people to sign, or just to drop off flyers saying, are you aware of this? And if you are, come to the meeting, or, march on City Hall. But it does take volunteers to help us with that. And, hopefully over the next couple of weeks, we can really get this toolkit going and really come up with some ideas on how we can be more visible and more vocal. In a constructive manner. And one of the things that hurts us too is even with the zoning commission, I have to feel that some of them, honestly, these are not bad people. Okay, they're not sitting there. They didn't get appointed and sign up to say, how can I screw up Norwalk? I just don't believe that. So on some level, they've done their own analysis of this, and it fits what they think is a good thing to do. And the reason that comes from there is because you have people who are appointed, and then this is honestly my opinion. I mean, people in power, elected officials, are reluctant to appoint people who don't agree with what their agenda is, and what their own role is in terms of their impact on the community. And so I believe that all of those zoning commissioners truly believe that this is something that's beneficial to Norwalk. The thing that's disturbing about that as well, though, is when they articulate that, you'll often hear them and staff say that, East Norwalk is not a city unto its own, or its own town. It's part of a community. And we're looking at things that will benefit the whole community. But the fact of the matter is we need to push back on that, because the premise of Norwalk is that we're made up of diverse and really unique and wonderful neighborhoods. And East Norwalk is a very unique neighborhood. And so we don't want to become something that then becomes either a tourist attraction, or something that's for the benefit of drawing people regionally, to suit all of Norwalk and the region. They need to be aware of the fact that the changes that they're potentially making now are profound and are going to impact the residents of this neighborhood, for decades to come. And there won't be any undoing it. I do have to say that, folks, because I know somebody asked me once, like, when things go through, then like to kind of backpedal on them. It does not happen. It doesn't happen. So the effort now to either try to stop this or modify it and get out some of these really objectionable things has to happen in this push now. And that's, one of the reasons why we're developing this amount, or devoting this amount of time to it tonight, to discuss it, with the residents who did show up. And sadly, we can't, meet in person right now. We don't have a meeting place, and we know that City Hall knows that, and zoning knows that, and we're at a distinct disadvantage even communicating with them via Zoom. That whole process is inherently unfair to the public that they don't see us. You know, there's a big difference of seeing, 40 or 50 or 100 people in the Common Council chamber than there is listening to some obscure, voice behind a Zoom camera, or not even on camera. Another thing too, not to throw another wrench in this thing, but somewhere along the line in the past couple of months, you may not be aware that the ordinance committee of the Common Council approved the request from the administration and from staff to combine the planning and zoning commissions. Are folks aware of that, or?
Yes, it's a power grab. If you look at it, this just gives Steve Kleppen that much more power.
So basically what you have is you have two distinct boards that at one time were together, but then ultimately separated, so that you can have kind of a separation of powers versus the role of planning, essentially the POCD or the master plan, completely distinct from zoning, which is the which is the legal aspect of land use. I'm just oversimplifying it at that point. And so you have a couple of bodies. I think one is 8 commissioners and one is 7, and some of them are alternates, that are now going to be compressed into one commission with a fewer number of people all told. And the reason behind doing that, despite some of the rationale that's been spewed from City Hall, is to streamline the application process for developers and to remove a lot of the inherent costs involved in putting together a process for a major development. I mean, we're talking, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases, millions of dollars, with big things. But the amount of time that equates to money for developers to be able to go through land use boards, where they may have to go through Conservation Commission is one, but then to be able to separately pay all of those consultants and experts and lawyers and prepare things for a planning commission and then a zoning commission. And both of those processes are, basically separate. Once in a while, there'll be a joint presentation that they'll do. So the whole idea behind it is to be able to save time and money for the developers. It's certainly not for the average homeowner who wants to put a deck on their back, of their house, because none of that would actually advance to, to the level of a review through planning and zoning. Would have to be something much larger than that. So the whole rationale for it was to be able to save time and money for developers, to be able to go to one body, do basically one review, essentially one public hearing, the bare minimum, the letter of the law, which we're all familiar with. And there's not only no benefit to the community, but conversely, it really then blocks for the additional type of reviews that we would be involved in, that the developer had to go through before. That is already approved, and that commission actually, I think the way that they're handling it is that the mayor then essentially takes the resignation of all sitting commissioners and alternate commissioners, and then picks and chooses who he will appoint, either from that pool or to appoint new people, which I'm not going to harp on this, but we've never really have any East Norwalkers stepping up to the plate to sit on these commissions, which is important. We really would like people to do that. But so basically then the mayor is going to appoint a new pool of commissioners to form this combined planning and zoning commission. And those appointments require the approval of the Common Council, and the Common Council is a majority of 14-1, with a majority with the mayor's party. So you can see where that's going. And I think that I don't know who on this call may know, but that process is happening quickly. And I believe that the new zoning commission is going to be seated immediately after the election.
Yeah, that's done.
Yeah.
Game
So
over.
then they'll be in place. And this is going to be interesting too. This is also in our petition ask, because essentially you could have a bunch of new commissioners that will be allowed to vote on this text amendment, on the East Norwalk plan, even though they haven't been a commissioner except for a couple of weeks. And I think the only criteria is that they can attest to the fact that they've listened to all of the public hearing tapes and read all of the pertinent documents, and then they would be allowed to vote. That's my understanding of it. So they may not have even, basically been engaged at all, depending on who the mayor appoints. But they'll be able to put this through. So one of the asks in the petition, when you see this, is that, again, we're asking for no further review of this, and that this thing at least be pushed into the new year, and that no new commissioner who hasn't been involved in this would be allowed to vote on it until it gets vetted further, with additional public forums as well. Anybody else?
Hello?
Yep.
Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, it's Mimi. How are you?
Hi, Mimi.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
I don't know. I'm with the speaker JJ earlier. And with it was it Judy? I'm not sure. Mary Beth. I feel like nobody is listening. I feel like you have done a fantastic job, Diane and ENNA, all of you, communicating through multimedia outlets, on your ENNA site, through polling, through, you name it. We've been at this for years now. And yes, they're a small group of loyal folks, you see their names in all these meetings who show up. There are people in my neighborhood who know quite a bit about this, but to your point, they've got young children, or they're working late, or they can't make meetings. And I can't tell you how many people have thanked me because they know that I'm involved and I'm okay to be a spokesperson and an advocate. And they've said, thank you so much, because you are looking out for us. And if we could actually be there physically at these meetings or speak, we would be. And we know what's going on, though we may not be there. We're aware of what is going on, and we'll sign any petition. We'll show up, we'll write any letter in, and we'll do polls. But, physically, we can't necessarily always be there. And to JJ's point, I feel like we're at this point where, we've been going with this whole East Norwalk neighborhood TOD. We've been through Harriman Consultants, this goes all the way back to 2018, right? With the vision workshops. And then we've had, we saw the first plans of what the what are they called? Mixed use development all around. We mission crept from like 3 buildings to all the way beyond the railroad trellis up toward exit 16, all the way up East Avenue. This thing has just grown. We've grown, not only have we crept from beyond the original, location to all the way up to exit 16. We've crept out, we've crept up, we've crept across. We're growing bodies. Every time we tune in, we're growing density. We have inadequate traffic study. We have inadequate parking requirements. Now we're going to have these tall buildings up and, all the way up East Avenue. And to your, what you were talking about earlier, I would love to see an illustrated, Charles does such a fantastic job with these graphics, maybe a depiction of what would East Avenue look like at 45 feet, buildings all the way up and down, just for kicks, what would that look like? And then perpendicular to East Avenue, all of where we live, these single family colonial homes, for a scale perspective, like you were talking about the balloons and doing the height. Like I know they did that over at the school, right? The school over, is it in Cranberry? They did some kind of a thing with the balloons to show height, because that school is going to be built out and it's actually now encroaching upon people's, one of them is my friend's, yards. They use the balloon for height, but maybe a more visual depictions of what this is actually the canyon effect that this could potentially be, could be a good idea. But I mean, I agree with some of these speakers that I think we're at the point where I love that you're doing a petition. I think that's so effective, and a protest, but time is of the essence, like strike when the iron's hot. Everybody's on board here right now. I would say too, like, it's so frustrating that we can't get into an actual physical, I know the Board of Ed is doing, they did for the early, the time change, they did in-person meetings, socially distanced, with X amount of people. But in addition to that, they offered, like what we're doing now, Zoom. They also offered the YouTube for viewing. Maybe we demand a hearing, a public hearing, in tandem with everything we're talking about. Maybe we say, hey, we really feel strongly that we need to meet with you folks, City Hall, Mayor Rilling, planning and zoning. Let's get everybody in the same room, because I feel like sometimes one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing half the time, or people are loving that they're in Zoom because they're not having to deal with the elephant in the room. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe like to what everyone is saying, if we can get everybody here on this call, and I see a few people dropped off, to commit to, and like we can all kind of mobilize and organize actionable results, like what JJ said. I'm all on board with that. Like we can try to figure this out. I feel like we've communicated ourselves to death and over communicated out to everybody, and you can see who is really committed to this and who, like I said, have time restraints or have little children, and they're kind of relying upon us to be the mouthpieces. Why don't we do this? I think you have enough people who would commit to doing this. Maybe we can have a timeline how we can do this, but I would say a public meeting where all of the people who we're talking about we're all in the same meeting, and we can all figure out what we're going to say to them. Everything we've said tonight, we can all kind of organize what we're going to say at the podium or wherever, in tandem with the petition and the protest. And I think that's great. I think that would be very effective. Okay,
thanks,
that's
Mimi.
I had a steep glass of wine, so I'm like, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I do think that it's up to each of us to enlist, family and friends and neighbors, business owners, whoever you interact with in the community, to make sure they're aware, and then say, what are you willing to do? And I think that's why we tried to come up with a toolkit, like I said, where there's kind of something for everybody to meet their, the level of commitment and their time and their energy and money, etc. So that's what we hope to do, but to get people to commit to do it. So if somebody says, I'm going to write a letter to the editor and I'm going to send, an email to the mayor. Okay, if you're committing to do that, then do that.
Right.
And then,
do you think those work though? Do you think the emails and the letters to the editor work necessarily? Are they effective?
Well, the emails do, because I see Charles shaking his head. The emails do only if they come in quantity. I mean, they have to get a lot of hits of people sending emails. A lot of the benefit of the emails is that if it's the same old names, it's the same people, they don't see that as these are the engaged people in the community who really are aware of things, and they want to make sure that they're communicating what their sentiment is, good, bad, or indifferent. They see it as, oh, it's her again.
Right.
So one of the things that is impactful is when they see new names on emails and letters, they take notice. And I have noticed, it's funny, in the past, I've noticed when, elected officials don't bother answering some of us, which I think is bizarre.
Oh yeah, I'm one of those.
Literally common council people. They just don't, answer, residents. Sure. But it's funny because when they see a new name from someone, or someone from a street that's not like one of those streets, they will respond with, you know, oh, Miss Chang, and thank you so much for writing, and we're concerned about it, and we're take your into consideration. It's like it's impactful when they see just not the usual names. So I mean, all of these things have a different impact, but I I'll defer back to Charles because I saw him shaking his head on the letters.
I don't know. I just can I just close I think it's time. I think what we all did, when our group effort with Norden was quite effective. And I think it might be time to go, I don't want to say scorched earth, but, to make ourselves heard, to demand a meeting, to kind of take the bull by the horns, turn it around and say, okay, now it's your turn to listen to us and hear what the issues we have, and hear that we're not against development, which that keeps getting put out there that oh, they don't want any part, they don't. No, that's not true. We want responsible scaled development. That's what we want. We don't want thousands more vehicles, no traffic study, environmental like air quality issues. I think we really do have to present publicly to them and make sure they're all in the room, and that would be very effective to be in person. Yeah. And that's all.
And
Thank
really
you.
Thanks, Mimi. And really to articulate to them the realities of it, because I think that it's incumbent on us to say, look, we understand that you have this vision and that you're invested in it, and we get it, that it's something that you think is possible. So here's what you think is going to happen in East Norwalk. Let us tell you what's really going to happen. Right. And we can cite other examples from this city and others of how these things with the best intentions turn into something that's quite different and can't be undone. And I think, one of them is Spinnaker at 230 East Avenue at the train station. I think that they had good intentions, that they thought that was the place to have that magnitude of development, and they bought into the notion that there would be some bonus amenities for the community. Yeah. And the first things that went were the amenities, the rooftop restaurant. Right. Someone wrote into the zoning and to elected officials the other day when we prompted people to write. To say that they're basically in favor of this whole plan and really looking forward to this, amount of development, because it will bring in, coffee shops and, maybe bakeries and some retail and, maybe a park. And I just really wanted to just write back and say, let me just tell you the reality of that, because, something like that, no one's going to open up a coffee shop next to Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, that's not going to happen. We had a nice little bakery / little sit-down restaurant in East Norwalk at the corner of Fort Point, and the DOT came and kind of just took that away and destroyed that. And there are storefronts right now that people can do that in, and development is not an impediment to try to get those things in. Right. But even when you look at Spinnaker, there was supposed to be a structure that was built at the front of 230 East Avenue, on the East Avenue side, that the bottom would house a small coffee shop, maybe newspapers, maybe gum, and types of things, for commuter hopping on or off a train. So is that there today? Can somebody tell me? Because I kind of watch the road when I'm driving. I'm being facetious, but Diane, it's not there, right?
Well, Diane, along the same lines, all you have to do is look over at Waypoint. Mm-hmm. If you look at Waypoint, they put that up 2 or 3 years ago, and these people have a mentality that if you build it, people will come. And it's like, I'm sorry, Field of Dreams, that's not the case. And so what we end up seeing, I drove past Waypoint the other day, and half of those storefronts on the ground floor are empty. So yes, they are renting out apartments. And there are people who are paying rent, and they are paying state income taxes, and that goes to Hartford. It doesn't come back here. Right. Or it comes back pennies on the dollar. And so the reality is Hartford's making out, we're not. And this vision that, all we need to do is beautify East Norwalk with lovely new buildings is a pipe dream. there are parts of the plan that are good. There are parts of the plan that I do think will benefit the area. But this notion that, well, if we just give developers whatever they want and a 7 to 15 year tax break, then we will benefit at some point in time down the road. That's where I feel like these folks are just talking to themselves.
Thank you.
Sorry. So
do I see Richard Fontana has had his hand up for a while? I think. I'm not seeing everybody. No, I think Megan is still.
It's Dick Fontana. I live.
Oh, hi, Dick.
Hi. I live over in the area of Marvin Beach and the Marvin School and so forth. So if I see we're searching for a way to get people involved and get them to understand the danger this could all be. I think the hot button that people can relate to is traffic and parking. We're not against development, but this development wants to increase density. And density is going to make those areas that are currently at risk, traffic and parking, just that much worse. I mean, could one have a petition that basically says, don't move forward on anything that includes increased density? In other words, if you try and stop it, you're anti-development, which gets you in trouble. But I think saying basically we need some sanity around here until we're comfortable with the fact that traffic and parking are going to be addressed. There should be nothing that allows the increased density. I mean, for somebody who lives on that end of town, it's become a game of, well, if I want to go connect with the real world, if I have to go down 136, there are days you got to forget about it. You can't head towards South Norwalk. Or if I want to head toward I-95, forget about East Avenue certain times. And lately, one of my escapes has been, and people that live in my area, it's their escape, is Strawberry Hill, and you can't even get out that way sometimes. Now, some of it's temporary, I understand, and it's going to get better. But my feeling is, I don't understand why our town fathers are looking at increasing density if they're going to lower our quality of life instead of just getting it back to normal. So I guess I've heard a number of times it mentioned we don't want to be against development. And one way to state that is, yeah, we don't want to be against development that makes the current problems worse, that we have to see solutions to those.
Right.
And that, I think, should be an important part of anything that's put in front of any public meeting or any other meetings. That it's not about stopping development. It's about fixing our problems as we go forward.
Right.
And that we can't just add more density because that's what developers want.
Yeah. Thank you, Dick. Yep, I agree. And I think a lot of the push for that is an overall state mandate that the local administration adheres to of, increased growth in the state, which is, primarily residential, and the kind of the backfiring of what we thought was going to be a transit-oriented development plan that would look at improving the area around the train station and better utilizing the immediate area, to one that says the idea, and it's not just new here in Connecticut or Norwalk. I mean, it's a notion that people subscribe to wholeheartedly across the nation, is to be able to provide housing that's extremely dense and to some level affordable, which this is not going to be, by the way. And to do that as densely as you can around transit hubs and primarily commuter railways. So, one of the benefits of living in East Norwalk has now become, another one of the issues that we say could be the bane of our existence, of being cursed to have a small commuter rail station here. Because now what it does is it fits into all those checkboxes at the state that says this is where we can plan for and hopefully not fund. Somebody had just mentioned the tax breaks, but I won't even go into that. But this is where we can plan for increased population and do it densely. And that's the plan. Because I do think people.
Every time I've tuned in, I admit I don't do it all the time. When the subject of traffic comes up, somebody says it's not my job, man. It's, that's somebody else's problem. We didn't address that as part of this.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I misheard it, but what I'm hearing is that whatever happens on the traffic issue, and that is that correct?
Well, I think
or is there
first
a
of all,
plan somewhere that's going to really resolve the problem with this increased density? Maybe I missed the plan somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that developers and zoning and planning and folks get very good at on the other side is that they're able to have an answer to every objection. And some of them are the laughable ones, and we all know them, the traffic impact. Well, they're going to be able to have, look at each development on its own merits. And we already know the traffic expert is going to say there's no significant impact. The same thing with the Water Pollution Control Authority. They're going to come back and say, we have a system that can handle millions of more gallons of sewer and rainwater runoff. It's not a problem. They have an answer regarding the water supply, utilities, managing traffic. It's kind of laughable because Steve Kleppen will routinely answer the traffic issue with saying, we're already addressing congestion and traffic flow by the improvements that we in the state are making on East Avenue. And, some people are, especially zoning commissioners, are kind of nodding and going, okay, when the reality of that is that those plan changes took into account traffic that hadn't been, foreseeable at that time. There was no mall, there was no 230 East Avenue, there was no plan for TOD development. So it only took into account these minuscule increases in traffic, that they use as a standard in the state for how you increase traffic. And the fact of the matter is that none of these road improvements are related to the TOD plan. They were all planned out under the East Avenue widening and lowering project. So, you're absolutely right, Dick, that there's a response to everything, but there's no backup to it that says what's going to happen when you're wrong. What's going to happen when we have a gridlock community? What's going to happen when every two person household does have two cars? There's not going to be any turning back at that point, with those impacts. Not to mention police, fire. The Hour just had the articles on how the fire department with these latest storms had something like a 600 call increase in their volume to respond to calls. The police department is so understaffed, they're having trouble being able to provide the appropriate amount of patrol cars. We have the burden on the schools, on all the city services, and really no one is addressing that when you continue to have this kind of density.
The reason I bring that up is that these are things that if you want to get people to participate, when you talk air quality and things like that, it's hard for people to visualize that and grab onto it. But for anybody who's tried to, I visit a business on 136 on Van Zant over by Osborne, and I've pulled out of that business, and to go home, I should make a right turn and just go north on 136. But I can't even do that. It's backed up so much. So I end up heading over toward Vets Park and going around. And
wow.
And my point is, my neighbors see that too. I think things like the parking and the traffic and the police response. If anybody has an alarm system and seeing the response on their alarm system from the police, and I'm not knocking them. I mean, the guy wasn't sitting around doing nothing when it took him 25 minutes to answer the alarm.
Yeah,
those are tangible things that I think people have felt, and it can help mobilize people.
Right.
If the tangible ones are the ones that are brought, when you're trying to drag people into the discussion, or a public meeting or anything else.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Thanks, Dick. Because maybe what we need to do is in addition to the petition, which is a little bit more elaborate and has a lot of detail in it, because we're going to get one bite at the apple in the next couple of weeks. It'd be really nice to have an impact in the next week, for obvious reasons. But I think people really need to be able to look at a list of things that maybe is just really, simplistic, that says, here's the type of impact it can have on your life as a resident, and really highlight those things, in terms of, potential police response and, traffic and congestion and
or another way
gridlock
is,
and schools and.
a little piece of paper stuck to it with 5 questions on it.
Yeah.
How many times have you been stuck in traffic on East Avenue when you're in a hurry to go somewhere?
Mhm.
Or have you been disappointed when the alarm went off with the response to it? Or something else happened? That gets, if so, sign this petition, is I guess my point.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I think people are feeling right now.
Hey, Dick, would you do me a favor then? Would you make a list, like, for you personally, that says,
Sure.
here are
I'll
the
drop
things
you a
that might
note,
pique
yeah.
my interest, and send them to me?
Sure. Okay.
And anyone else who's still on the call, I would be really interested to see what those components are of a question that you might answer that says, I really want to learn more about this, or,
Okay.
get involved.
All right. Thanks for hearing from me.
Thanks, Dick. All right, so I'll wrap this up by saying, please, if you didn't speak up, first of all, if you were on this session and you're still on and you don't know a whole lot about this project, just let us know and we'll get you up to speed as quickly as we can. And if you're listening and you have ideas of anything that you want to share about this plan that you think is constructive, and if you have ideas on how we can quickly be effective in sharing our concerns with city officials, so that we can at least be impactful enough to hit the brakes on this thing. And I think that's where we need to go at this point. And if we do that, then we maybe get a little bit of breathing space and some wiggle room, so that, we can plan out some meetings where hopefully we can meet in person and really put together a compelling argument for why this thing either, has to be either halted altogether or dramatically, reconfigured to, not only, I don't even think that we can hope that we're saying something to end up with something that's going to be incredibly beneficial to the community. I think that ship has sailed. I think at this point, really what we're looking to do is to guard against the type of development that's going to have long-term, far-reaching negative implications for East Norwalk. And that's kind of the target that we have to keep our eyes on. So watch your emails. The letters and the petition and stuff are just about ready to go. And we have already posted on the ENNA website just a little mini survey that people can fill out regarding this transit zone change. And also, please, when you're engaging with your neighbors, like Amy does, she's kind of the, keeps everybody there informed, get that survey and everything that we send out to you, emailed out to your neighbors and friends. And just to take the burden off of you guys, get us their emails, and so they can hear directly from us. If you have questions or anything or any communication, it's info@eastnorwalk.org. Thank you so much. Have a good night.